The mist was like the breath exhaled by a female ghost who, with lingering resentment in this world, returned every night. Until the sun rose and the wind shifted from the sea, no human effort could disperse it.
The place where the narrator, I, arrives is Mujin, which means mist harbor. He descends to his hometown Mujin ahead of a promotion at his father-in-law's company. In that place, thickly covered in mist, he encounters memories of the past and begins to look at the life he is currently living as something unfamiliar. He meets old friends and becomes involved with a music teacher from his former school. However, upon receiving a telegram from his wife telling him to attend a shareholders' meeting, he leaves Mujin again without resolving anything. The world that unfolds within the mist does not expand but repeats itself. The moment when this work becomes most vivid is the point where sensation arrives first. Memories of the past appear like intangible residues and then scatter, but the sensations of objects approach with clarity. Among them, the mist of Mujin follows like a shadow, symbolizing the entire novel. This work is often explained as a narrative centered on the symbol of mist or existential solitude. However, such interpretations make this text into an overly ordered structure. This work is permeated with a disorder that refuses to be read within a fixed frame. Rather than reducing this text to a single meaning, when viewed as the protagonist's psychological state that ultimately remains unresolved, the novel comes closer to the reader. At the center of the work lies an incomplete dialogue with one's past. Memories of hiding during the war, shame that remains unerased and unresolved. Upon this is layered the present life that unfolded differently from intention. The stability that came after the woman he lost. Wealth. Marriage to a well-connected, wealthy widow. A guaranteed position, a promotion to executive director. On the surface, it appears as order, but internally it remains a compromise. It is a present self that is not entirely honorable, yet not entirely disliked. The surrounding characters are no different. They speak of culture and purity, but ultimately are placed within a structure that repeats the same desires and sensations. The clear air of Mujin, which recalls the past, acts like a sleeping pill for the protagonist who cannot easily fall asleep.
The fresh brightness of sunlight, the low temperature of the air that gives elasticity to the skin, and the slight saltiness mixed in the sea breeze.
At night, Mujin offers a synesthetic experience where sound and light overlap.
What are you thinking about?
The sound of frogs. I looked up at the night sky. The stars were blurred, hidden behind the falling mist.
Time collides with itself and shakes the present. At this moment, the sentences follow experience.
When I listened to the croaking of frogs, which sounded like countless silk clamshells rubbing against each other at once, I felt those frog sounds turning into countless sparkling stars within my senses. A strange phenomenon occurred within me, where auditory images transformed into visual images.
However, such moments do not last long. In other scenes, before experience is fully formed, a mode of explanation already appears. At this point, expression is no longer the result of experience, but a surface that replaces it. The past is imprinted in memory through sexual imagery and occasionally awakens the dormant self in reality. Memories of masturbation in a small room while hearing that peers called to the front had died. A shoeshine boy fondling the breasts of a mad woman at Gwangju Station. A moment of lust upon seeing the corpse of a bar hostess who committed suicide. On sleepless nights arise thoughts such as, somewhere, couples must be copulating. These sexual scenes are also placed within the flickering flow of memory. They do not form a single network of meaning. They are merely fragments of scattered memory encountering reality. Only one person accidentally met in Mujin becomes someone who intrudes into his life. Ha In-suk, a music teacher at his former school, sings the popular song Tears of Mukpul at the house of Cho, a classmate who has become a successful tax office chief, and evokes pity in the narrator. This is because she is a vocalist who once sang Bel di Vedremo from Madama Butterfly at her graduation recital.
The way she sang Tears of Mokpo lacked the bending tone heard in bar girls singing. It lacked the cracked voice that usually brings popular songs to life. It lacked the sorrowfulness that such songs typically contain.
She wants to go to Seoul and asks the narrator to take her there. This teacher Ha, who resembles the narrator's past self, forms a relationship with him in the seaside town and offers him an experience of deviation, and the narrator feels love. However, that love, unlike with he, who left before marriage, and unlike his current wife, wavers like all the fragments of Mujin.
I am in love because you are myself, at least the version of myself that I dimly love from the past.
However, the narrator tears up the letter he hastily wrote, promising to call her to Seoul after receiving the telegram. Within the continuous flow of past and present, ideal values and vulgar desires, the ending shows a compromise with reality, leaving everything behind. This work is not a complete narrative. Memory remains as fragments, and the present repeats without resolving them. This work does not explain a specific era, but instead shows figures of an age living while despising vulgarity, yet struggling within it, embedded in memories of war and the dark post-war reality. A world where matchmakers introduce women whose only asset is their sexual organ to Cho, who passed the civil service exam. Listing unorganized memory and the flow of consciousness itself appears to be the theme of the novel. Memories of hiding in a small room during the war, shame that cannot be shaken off, and the present life that continues from it do not converge into a single meaning. They remain as fragments and repeat. Thus, this text is not a narrative interpreting an era, but one that shows the state of being uninterpreted. And that very state, the scattered flow of memory and consciousness without direction, is the air of the era captured by this work. The deep shame the protagonist feels when leaving Mujin offers many clues to its origin. Mujin is dark, yet it preserves the purity of an untainted time. That shame may be toward Ha In-suk, whom he leaves without a word, despite promising to take her to Seoul, or toward himself, who returns to the worldly life he inwardly despises, or toward the reality of returning to dust after leaving behind clear sensory images, or toward his own wavering within endlessly changing objects. Of course, it may be none of these, or all of them mixed together. It may even be related to the bar hostess who took cyanide instead of a sleeping pill. The past, sheltered by the mist, offers comfort, but has no power to hold him. Beyond the mist, the present awaits. Even if it feels shameful before the past, it still exerts a pull. Nothing except the present self has binding force. Though the reality of becoming an executive in a wealthy family is horrifying enough to make him want to crawl into a grave, he is drawn back to Seoul like iron pulled by a magnet.
I once again found myself among the vulgar. In Mujin, everyone thinks this way, that others are all vulgar. I too think so. All actions of others feel like meaningless games, no heavier than nothing.
This novel does not unfold based on a clear narrative structure. Within such a flow, landscapes that seem to hold meaning allow us to look into the protagonist's inner self, and that inner self may be part of what creates the deep shame of returning to reality.
I thought of a place where a river full of water flowed, where a grass-covered embankment stretched to the sea 6 kilometers away, where there were small forests, many bridges, many alleys, many mud walls, schools surrounded by tall poplars, offices with yards paved with black pebbles from the shore, and straw mats laid out on the streets at night. That place was Mujin.
Mujin is the hometown he once walked over 400 kilometers on foot to when the last train stopped during the war, and the place where he crouched in a small room listening to classmates departing for the front. In contrast, Seoul, the place where he came to be known as the most successful among his former classmates, is where he hears his father-in-law say, "You are certain to become an executive this time, so go down to the countryside for a week, relax and rest. Once you become an executive, your responsibilities will only grow heavier." Mujin, which allows him to view the present from a distance, is a space that evokes past time. In Mujin, both space and time allow him to rest, but do not hold him. It is a place where a junior who claims to admire Fitzgerald lives modestly, solemnly, and in poverty, unlike Fitzgerald's image. Rest in Mujin offers memories and pause, but is far from the busy reality of survival.
In Mujin, I was always shut in. With dirty clothes and a yellowed face, I lay about in a small room. When I was awake, endless lines of time mocked me as they passed, and when I slept, long nightmares whipped me cruelly.
A place where the curfew siren sounds. On sleepless nights, the siren becomes a companion to insomnia.
Somewhere, a clock struck 4. Soon after, the siren signaling the lifting of the curfew sounded. The siren was abrupt and loud. It lasted long. Everything, objects and thoughts, was absorbed into it. Eventually, nothing remained in the world but the siren. Even that sound seemed as if it would continue until it could no longer be felt. Then suddenly, it lost strength, broke, and faded with a long groan.
Mujin is both a space of vulgar people, where a successful classmate wants to show off his office, and a space imbued with sorrow, where people commit suicide every early summer. If one were to express Mujin in color, it would be a dull, faded yellow. Perhaps that is why the music teacher says Mujin is a beautiful town at night.
The streets were empty. People crouched in the shade of eaves. Children wandered naked in the shadows. And in the blazing sunlight of the empty square, 2 dogs were mating with their tongues hanging out.
Mujin is a stage where the present self and past self meet, where 2 selves alternate through compressed time. At the same time, it reveals the stark contrast between the drifting reality of soul and the vivid truth of life that still breathes. In a sense, Mujin may be read as a confession before the protagonist's promotion. Though he is not absolved by his past self, it suggests life itself is a compromise between past and present, inner self and reality, dream and instinct. Among the many images flowing beyond time and space, the clearest contrast may be this: a world divided by mist, between inside and outside, as distant as life and death, yet not so different once the mist clears. Perhaps that is the image of the bar hostess who took cyanide instead of a sleeping pill.
What is it?
A suicide case.
The policeman replied without interest. Who is it?
A bar woman from town. Every early summer, a few always die.
I see.
She was a particularly vicious one. I thought she wouldn't die, but I guess she was no different after all.